Welcome to Whispers from the Wild. Hope you all are doing well. Today's story revolves around a mysterious murder case, one of the most puzzling and unsettling events in the history of Germany. This unsolved case has baffled people for decades, and the more you dive into it, the more complex it becomes. It is filled with eerie and bizarre occurrences. So, what exactly happened in this case, and why has it remained so enigmatic? Let's get started. The tale begins in Bavaria, an area located in the southern part of Germany. Around 70 kilometers from the capital of Bavaria lies a small village named Grobern. In 1921, just outside this village, about 500 meters away, stood an isolated farmhouse known as Hinterkaifeck. What made this farmhouse even more isolated was the fact that there wasn't another house within 500 meters of it. A family of farmers lived there. There were 6 members. The head of the family was Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old man known for his rough and violent nature. His wife, Georg, was 72 years old. Their widowed daughter, Viktoria Gabriel, who was 35, also lived with them along with her 2 children, Georg, a 7-year-old girl, and Joseph, a 2-year-old boy. Lastly, a 24-year-old maid named Maria Baumgartner also lived in the house with them. The family owned several fields, livestock, horses, and various animals. However, Andreas was not well liked in the village. He was known to beat his wife and children, which further alienated him from the villagers. Moreover, there was another dark secret about Andreas that the villagers despised, but we'll get to that later. Andreas didn't care much about their opinion. He kept to himself, interacting with the villagers only when necessary. Everything seemed to be running smoothly in the family until one fateful night when things started to change. One night when the maid, Maria, was asleep in her room. Suddenly, she heard strange footsteps coming from the attic. At first, she dismissed it, thinking it was just her imagination. But as the footsteps continued, she grew frightened. She decided to tell Andreas about it. Andreas checked the attic, but found nothing. He assured Maria that there was no one up there and told her to go back to bed. A few nights later, when the rest of the family was out working in the fields, Maria was once again alone in the house. This time, she not only heard footsteps in the attic, but also sensed someone moving around in other rooms of the house. When Andreas and the family returned, she shared her concerns once more. Andreas, again, searched the attic and the rest of the house, but found no one. This bizarre activity continued, especially when Maria was left alone at night. She would frequently hear footsteps and strange noises, which terrified her. Maria was convinced that the house was haunted, and that something supernatural was at play. Eventually, she decided to quit her job and leave the farmhouse, terrified of what might happen if she stayed any longer. The villagers were curious, and when they asked Maria why she had left, she recounted the strange occurrences she had experienced. It wasn't long before rumors began circulating that the Hinterkaifeck farmhouse was haunted. People whispered about ghosts and dark forces inhabiting the isolated house, and soon enough, Andreas found it difficult to hire a new maid, as no one wanted to work in the haunted farmhouse. Andreas angrily dismissed the idea that his house was haunted. He refused to believe that anything supernatural was happening. Still, the eerie events persisted. One night, Andreas himself was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps. He heard someone walking through the house, but once again, when he investigated, there was no one to be found. As time passed, more odd things started happening. Objects in the house would move on their own. Tools and belongings that were left in one place would be found in a different spot. Sometimes, when the family returned from working in the fields, they would find their cows and horses wandering outside, even though they had locked them in the barn before leaving. In the month of March, and things took an even stranger turn. One morning, Andreas noticed an unfamiliar newspaper in the house. The newspaper was from Munich a city about 70 kilometers away. Confused, Andreas asked his wife and daughter if they had brought the newspaper into the house, but they both denied it. Andreas thought that perhaps the newspaper delivery man had mistakenly left it there. However, when he asked the delivery man, he was told that no one in their area subscribed to that particular newspaper. One day, key to the main door of the house went missing. Andreas questioned everyone in the family, but no one admitted to taking it. They swore they hadn't touched the key. This incident made Andreas even more anxious, and he became convinced that someone was sneaking into the house. One morning, Andreas stepped outside and noticed footprints in the fresh snow leading from the nearby forest to the farmhouse's machine room. The machine room's lock was broken, and the footprints only led into the house, with no signs of anyone leaving. It was as if someone had entered the house and never left. Alarmed, Andreas thoroughly searched the house again, checking every room and corner, but found no one. The dog, known for barking at any stranger who approached the house, had been eerily silent for the past 6 months. Even on the night of the strange footprints, the dog hadn't barked once. Andreas shared the story of the footprints with his neighbors, Lorenz and Jacob, whose homes were 500 meters away in the village. Lorenz suggested they inspect the farm together to see if anything was wrong. Once they arrived, the men did a thorough search of the property, but found no signs of a break-in. Everything seemed in order, yet a tension filled the air. As the days passed, life on the Gruber farm continued as usual. One evening, again strange noises echoed from the attic. At first, Andreas dismissed it as the wind or perhaps a stray animal, but the sounds persisted. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, could be heard pacing above them. Andreas grabbed a lantern and, with trembling hands, climbed up to the attic. His heart pounded as the light flickered in the darkness. But once again, the attic appeared empty. He told his family it was nothing, trying to calm their fears, though he was scared himself. A few days later, daughter Viktoria mentioned that some of her belongings had gone missing, small items like a set of keys and a watch. Andreas brushed it off as forgetfulness, though deep down, he knew something was wrong. He didn't tell the others, but he, too, had noticed things out of place and doors left open that he was sure he'd closed. Then, one night, it happened again. The strange noises returned, but this time they were louder. The sound of footsteps echoed through the house. This time, the family huddled together, fear clutching at their hearts. "We need to leave," Viktoria whispered, her voice trembling. "There's something in this house, Father." "There's nowhere to go," he said. "We'll be fine. We just need to stay alert." But something was wrong. Something was watching them. And soon, the Grubers would realize they were not alone. Strange occurrences became more frequent, like tools and personal items continued to disappear or shift positions. Footsteps echoed at odd hours. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, a sudden knock on the front door startled them. Andreas stood and slowly approached the door. When he opened it, no one was there. He stepped outside, holding up the lantern to scan the darkness. He felt as though he was being watched, that there was nothing, no sign of life, no tracks, only silence. "It's probably just some local boys playing tricks," he said, though he didn't believe it himself. The following morning, their maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had only recently started working for the Grubers, seemed especially uneasy. She said Viktoria that she felt watched, even while doing the simplest tasks. She considered leaving the farm altogether, but Viktoria convinced her to stay. That night, they came again, this time from within the walls themselves. It seemed as though someone, or something, was walking through the house. Andreas grabbed his rifle and patrolled the house, searching every room, every corner. The attic, too, appeared empty, but still he felt being watched. Then, the tragedy struck. The perpetrator used a mattock belonging to the family farm and killed the family with blows to the head. The family was found brutally murdered, their bodies hidden in the barn. They killed Joseph, sleeping in his bassinet, and Baumgartner, in her bedchamber. Their neighbor, Lorenz, among them, were the first to discover the massacre, after no one had seen the Grubers 4 days. The sight was gruesome, all being killed in cold blood. What was most chilling was the revelation that the house had been lived in after the murders. Food had been eaten, fires lit in the hearth, and someone had cared for the animals. Whoever had committed the atrocity had stayed behind, moving through the house undetected, as if it were their own. One of the suspects was Gabriel. He had reportedly been killed in December 1914, during the First World War, but his body was never recovered. Viktoria had conceived and given birth to her son Joseph in her husband's absence. Remember the dark secret I mentioned before? Andreas was having incestuous relationship with Viktoria. Andreas was found to be physically assaulting his daughter, and the town convicted them both of incest. The boy was rumored to have been the product of incest. This might have angered Carl, but it's just an assumption. Even people doubted Lorenz, as he was first to see them dead. Lorenz was believed to have had a relationship with Viktoria, Gabriel, and father Joseph, after the death of his first wife. Another speculation was that Lorenz murdered the family, after Viktoria demanded financial support for young Joseph. The mystery of Hinterkaifeck farm would remain unsolved for decades. The footprints in the snow, the strange noises in the attic, and the eerie feeling of being watched all pointed to a malevolent presence. Yet, no one could say for certain who or what was responsible for the heinous crimes that haunted the quiet, isolated farm. That's the conclusion of the Hinterkaifeck story. The real-life event remains one of Germany's most famous unsolved mysteries. The murders at the farm in 1922 are chilling, and despite numerous investigations over the years, no definitive culprit has ever been identified. Many theories have been proposed, but none have been proven. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. If you enjoyed this spooky tale, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Whispers from the Wild for more chilling stories. I'll see you in the next one.